All right, we're back on the record on State versus Loyd. He's present with his attorneys. State Attorney's Office is present. Everybody ready to go?
Yes, sir. Yes.
All right, let's bring the jury back. State recognized presence of the jury?
Yes, ma'am.
Defense?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Welcome back. Hope you had a good lunch. State, you may call your next witness.
State calls Dr. Joshua Stephany.
Sir, you can remove your mask. Okay. Step, raise your right hand, please hold it.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Have a seat, Doctor. You may inquire.
Thank you, Your Honor.
You can adjust that.
Would you please introduce yourself to the jury?
Joshua Stephany, Stephany.
What do you do for a living?
I am the Chief Medical Examiner for Districts 9 and 25.
And what does that mean? What do you do?
Basically, the job of a medical examiner is to determine the cause and manner of death. As the Chief Medical Examiner, I do that as well as oversee my whole office.
Can you describe for the jury your educational background and your training that allowed you to do that job?
4 years of undergraduate school, 4 years of medical school, 5 years of pathology residency, 1 year of forensic pathology fellowship.
And once you completed your education, did you begin with the medical examiner's office at that point?
Yes,
Okay. And how long have you been with the medical examiner's office?
since July of 2007.
Okay. Are you licensed to practice medicine in the state of Florida?
Yes,
You mentioned that part of your duties involved the performance of autopsies, correct?
I did not, but it is.
Okay. Can you explain to the jury what an autopsy is and what it
An autopsy is basically the investigation or examination of someone after they passed away. It includes multiple different things. First, again, it's an examination, so the first part would be an external examination, then an internal examination, and then looking at each organ individually. All the time while we're doing this, we're taking photographs, we're taking our notes, we look for any injuries or any evidence of medical intervention or disease processes.
Can you estimate about how many autopsies you performed in your career?
Over 5,000.
What does the term pathology mean?
Pathology is the study of disease.
What about forensic pathology?
Forensic pathology is a subspecialty of pathology which takes into account everything about pathology, the study of disease, natural disease, and then incorporates trauma.
So as a medical examiner, are you considered a forensic pathologist?
Yes.
This time, Your Honor, the state will request permission to allow this witness to give opinion testimony pursuant to the evidence code.
No objection.
All right. Permission granted.
Let me direct your attention to January 9th of 2017. Did you perform an autopsy on Debra Clayton?
Yes.
Was there a case number assigned to that autopsy from your medical examiner's office?
Yes.
What was it?
ME, which stands for medical examiner, 2017, which is the date, and then the number is 63.
Where was that autopsy performed?
At the District 9 Medical Examiner's Office.
And how did Debra Clayton arrive at the medical examiner's office?
She was transported by our transport service from the hospital to our office.
How was Lieutenant Clayton dressed when she arrived at the medical examiner's office?
I don't believe she was still wearing any clothes.
Okay. Did you see any signs of medical intervention when you first examined Lieutenant Clayton?
Yes.
Can you describe to the jury what those were?
I'm going to refer to my report to be exact. She had an endotracheal tube, which is a tube that goes in your mouth. Electrocardiogram pads on the right chest, and left abdomen, and an intraosseous catheter in the left shoulder. That is a catheter that goes right into your bone.
And are those standard medical devices used in the treatment that attempts to save somebody's life?
Yes.
Okay. Did you determine how tall she was and how much she weighed?
She was 65 inches, or 5'5", and 157 pounds.
And what was her age?
42.
During the autopsy, I think you mentioned earlier that did you take photographs?
Either myself or they were taken under my direct supervision.
Okay. Were diagrams also created to show the location of certain injuries and the path of travel of the mechanism of that injury?
Yes.
May I approach, Your Honor?
You may.
Showing you what's been marked as State's Exhibit U, a composite of 17 photos, as well as T, a composite of 4 diagrams. Take a look at those and tell me if you recognize both of those items.
Yes, I do.
As to State's Exhibit U, the 17 photographs, what are those generally? Are those the photographs that were taken during the course of your autopsy?
Yes.
Do they fairly and accurately depict Lieutenant Debra Clayton as she was at the time she arrived at the autopsy and at the time you were performing it?
Yes.
Do they fairly and accurately depict the injuries that you noticed?
Yes.
As far as State's Exhibit T, the diagrams, are the diagrams that you, as the medical examiner, created?
Yes.
And are they fairly and accurately depict the pictorial representation of her injuries?
Yes.
This time, State would move T into evidence, the diagrams, as State's 21.
Any objections?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
I need to see the photos one more time.
This is T, the diagrams.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, no objection.
To the diagrams?
Diagrams are State's T, Your Honor, is 21.
All right. These will be admitted without objection as State's number 21. It's a composite exhibit consisting of 4 diagrams.
And the State would move State's U into evidence with the court's permission as State's 22, 17
Any-
photos.
Any objections?
No objection.
All right. This will be admitted without objection as State's number 22, a composite consisting of 17 sequentially numbered photographs.
At this time, the State would also move into evidence State's Exhibit S, which is a stipulation entered into by the parties involved. May I
Any
approach?
objection to the
No
stipulation?
objection.
All right, thank you. Thank you. All right, this will be admitted into evidence by stipulation of the parties at State's Exhibit number 23. Go ahead and mark it, and then I'm going to read it to the jury. All right, ladies and gentlemen, this is a stipulation of victim identification. The Assistant State Attorney, M. Ryan Williams, and Defendant Markeith Loyd, as well as the attorney for the defendant, Terrence Lenneman, stipulate that the identity of the deceased, who's found by law enforcement at the Walmart located at 3101 West Princeton Street on January 9th, 2017, and upon whom Dr. Joshua Stephany performed an autopsy on January 9th, 2017, is Debra Clayton. Because the defense and the state have stipulated to the identity of the victim, this fact must be considered as true in your deliberations. You may proceed.
Your Honor, may I publish States 21 and 22 at this time?
Yes, sir.
Showing you photograph 1 of States
You can have the
22.
exhibit back.
Who's represented in this photograph?
The decedent, Debra Clayton?
Okay, and is that the person upon whom you performed the autopsy?
Yes.
Can you generally describe to the jury the injuries that you found on Lieutenant Clayton?
First, there were multiple gunshot wounds, a total of 4. And then I can go into more detail, but then there was also some what we call blunt force trauma. There was abrasions to her face and her knees.
Okay. You mentioned there were 4 gunshot wounds?
Correct.
Generally, where were they located? We'll get into the specifics.
There was one in the neck, which also went to the back. There was one in the leg, one in the abdomen, and I think another one in the abdomen, the superficial to the abdomen.
Just by looking at Lieutenant Clayton's body without any other information, are you able to tell the order in which those gunshot wounds were inflicted upon her?
No.
Okay. Using the photographs we just showed, I'm going to ask you to walk the jury through the various injuries that you just described in a little more detail. Starting with the injury to her neck, I'm showing you photograph 2 of States 20.
Come up to the bench. You may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Showing you photograph 2 of States 22, starting with the injury to her neck. Describe what we see in this photograph, please.
This is the decedent's right neck. What you see there is a defect, and that is the entrance gunshot wound to the right neck.
And how do you know it's an entrance wound instead of an exit wound?
Well, typically, difference between entrance wound and exit wounds, entrance wounds are more punched out, like a cookie cutter. Entrance wounds are more slit-like or stellate, and you can often put the sides back together. Also, it's a lot easier when there's a projectile at the end of the pathway, so we know that this is the entrance wound because there was a projectile, if you follow the track, at the other end of it.
Can you describe for the jury the damage that the projectile caused as it entered the right side of her neck and traveled through her body?
The projectile entered her neck, crossed what we call the cricoid cartilage, which is, if you feel your neck is your Adam's apple, lacerated or fractured that. Went across into her left chest, fractured 3 ribs, the posterior aspects of the first through third ribs on the left side, the left clavicle, contused the upper left lung, resulting in 700 milliliters of blood in the left chest cavity. The projectile then entered the back, lacerating the soft tissue musculature of the back, and caused a partial exit wound to the left back.
Can you describe the direction or the path of travel that the projectile took?
Front to back, right to left, and downward.
Did you notice any stippling or soot near the entrance wound in her neck?
I did not.
What is stippling?
Stippling is small little punctate lacerations and abrasions on the skin caused by burnt and unburnt gunpowder as it exits the end of the barrel of a gun.
And what's the term punctate mean?
Punctate just means really small.
Okay. What does the lack of stippling that you just described and the lack of soot around the entrance wound mean to you as far as the distance from the muzzle to her neck?
Typically, we say that you lose stippling or the injury caused by stippling at about 3 feet from the distance from the end of the barrel gun to the decedent. Now, of course, you have to have the exact gun and ammunition to test fire, but as the end of the barrel of the gun gets farther from the decedent, the stippling pattern gets spread out and more scant. So conversely, if you're closer, if the end of the barrel of the gun is closer to the decedent, you'll get a nice, dense, compact, tight area of stippling.
Okay. And you saw none around the entrance wound here, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Showing you photograph 3 of States 22. What do we see in this photograph?
That is the decedent's left back in what I termed a partial exit wound.
Okay. And you indicated, I believe earlier, you were able to recover a projectile from this wound?
Correct.
Okay. Did the projectile you recovered remain partially in her body?
Yes, it is right adjacent to that exit wound.
Okay. If she would have been wearing a bulletproof vest at the time, would that have contributed to cause that projectile not to exit her body fully?
Correct. That's why I call it a partial exit wound, because you do see the defect in her back, meaning the projectile did penetrate the skin, but there was something hard on the other, against her back, which caused the projectile to ricochet back inside her body.
Okay. Could that have been, that something hard could have been a bulletproof vest? Could it be concrete?
Yes.
Okay. Showing you photograph 4 of States 22. What does this show?
That is the exact same exit wound we just looked at. When I made an incision to the skin, you can see the projectile just beneath the skin.
And did you remove that projectile?
Yes.
Showing you photograph 5 of States 22. What does that show?
That is the projectile from the left back once it's been removed.
Okay. And showing you photograph 6 of States 22. What does this show?
That's a metal probe from the entrance wound to the exit wound, showing the path of the projectile through the decedent's body.
Okay. And moving on to image 1 or diagram 1 of States 21. What does this show, especially the red arrow at the top by her neck?
The red arrow indicates the pathway which I just mentioned from the right neck to the left back.
Okay. Moving on to the wound that you mentioned, I believe in her abdomen, buttock area. Showing you photograph 7 of States 22. What do we see here?
That's a entrance gunshot wound to the superior right buttock.
Okay. Can you describe for the jury the damage that that projectile caused as it entered the top of her right buttock and traveled through her body?
It penetrated the soft tissue and musculature of her right buttock, fractured the right iliac bone or the hip bone, and then penetrated and lacerated the small bowel in her abdomen, and then again partially exited the right abdomen.
Is the hip bone a relatively thick bone in the human body?
Relatively, yes.
Okay. Did you locate any soot or stippling near this entrance wound?
I did not.
And if she would have been wearing clothing, would that also have prevented any stippling from being present?
Yes, it would.
Okay. Showing you photograph 8 of States 22. What do we see here?
That is the decedent's right abdomen, and that is the partial exit wound on the right abdomen from the previous entrance gunshot wound.
Okay, and are you talking there? We see 2 wounds in this photo. Are you talking about the wound at the top right or the one on her right hip?
I'm talking about the one to the bottom of the picture.
Okay. Can you describe for the jury the path of travel, the direction and path of travel the projectile took?
Back to front, slightly upward, and left to right.
Showing you photograph 9 of States 22. What does this photograph show?
That is another probe showing the path of the projectile through the decedent's body.
Okay. Were you able to recover a projectile from this wound?
Yes.
Okay. And again, was there, even though there was an exit wound, how were you able to recover a projectile?
It was directly adjacent or right beneath the exit wound on the right abdomen.
Okay. Showing you photograph 10 of States 22. What do we see here?
That is the projectile that was recovered from the right abdomen.
Okay. Describe how the projectile appeared.
Repeat the question, please.
Can you describe how it appeared? Was it damaged?
Yeah, it's what we call deformed, because it clearly is in 2 pieces and does not look intact.
Was it more deformed than the first projectile that you recovered off of her back?
It appears more deformed, yes.
Okay. The projectiles. May I approach, Runner?
You may.
Showing you what's been marked as State's Exhibit V as in Victor. Can you take a look at that item? Open, actually, let me give you some scissors. Can you tell me if you recognize that item?
There's an internal package. You want me to open that too?
Yes, please. There are gloves next to you if you need them. Do you recognize the contents?
Yes, within this bag is my original packaging and labeling of the projectiles, as well as the projectiles have been removed and put in new packaging.
And how many projectiles are in there?
2.
Okay, are those the two we just talked about, the one from her back and the one from her hip?
Yes.
Are they in the same or substantially the same condition as when you removed them from her body, except for some additional markings from the Florida Department of Law Enforcement?
Yes.
Thank you. This time, State would move State's V as in Victor into evidence as State's 23.
Any objection? All right, this will be admitted into evidence without objections as State's 24.
24, sorry, Your Honor.
That's all right.
Showing you, again, photograph number 1 of State's 21. What does this show about the injury you just described that entered her right buttock and exited her hip?
If you look at the diagram on the right, and if you can read my writing, right above the right buttock, it says entrance B, which corresponds to the gunshot one we just spoke about. And then look at the picture on the left. There is an exit wound, and I put projectile recovered adjacent to the exit wound, and that says exit B.
Moving on to the wound in her lower abdomen. Showing you what's marked as 11, photograph 11 from State's 22. What does this show?
It shows a gunshot wound of the left abdomen.
Okay. Now we see 3 wounds here. Can you describe which one is the entrance, which one is the exit, and why there's a third one?
The bottom of the picture, or the inferior or lower abdomen, is the entrance wound. The projectile goes just deep to the skin, so it's a very superficial exits on the left abdomen, or the middle part of that picture, and then because of the position of her body, it abraded or scraped the upper left abdomen as it continued on its path.
Okay. Can you describe the damage this projectile caused as it traveled through her body?
It was very superficial, so it caused lacerations and hemorrhage of the subcutaneous soft tissue, which is the tissue just beneath the skin.
Did you locate any soot or stippling in any of these wounds that we saw?
I did not.
All right. Did you locate anything inside of any of these 3 wounds?
There was a piece of black fabric towards that wound in the middle of the abdomen.
Okay. And if she would have been wearing a black colored shirt, would that explain the presence of the black fabric?
It would.
Okay. Did you locate any projectile associated with this wound?
I did not.
I'm showing you photograph 12 of State's 22. What does this show?
That is a probe that shows the path of the projectile through the individual.
Okay. And describe the directionality or the path the projectile took.
It goes left to right and upward.
Okay. How extreme is the upward angle?
Not very extreme.
Okay.
I mean, Can you rephrase the question?
Sure.
I'm not sure what you mean by how extreme.
Sure. Is it almost going straight up from her toes up to her head if she was standing up?
Yes, as you can see in the pictures, it does do that.
Okay.
And I think I got my directions wrong. It's actually right to left.
Understood. Are you able, just by looking at the wounds and her body, to be able to tell what position she was in when she was struck?
I'm not.
Are you able to tell what position the shooter would have been in at the time the bullet was fired?
I cannot. I can by using the probes, we can only tell you in anatomic position, meaning with laying down with their palms out, the direction of the projectile through the individual, and generally where it came from.
And why can you not tell the relative positions between Lieutenant Clayton and the shooter?
Well, people who are alive, they can bend and flex in multiple different positions. So I don't know what position she was in at the time she was shot. And again, an assailant can have their arm in different directions. So I don't know the placement of an assailant, just judging by an autopsy.
Okay. Showing you image or diagram number 2 of States 21. What do we see here?
That shows the overall direction of the path of the wound in the decedent from the gunshot wound we just spoke about.
Okay. Moving on to the third gunshot wound, the one to the back of her thigh. And again, these are not suggestive of the order in which the bullets were fired, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Showing you photograph 13 of States 22. What do we see here?
That is a gunshot wound of the inner right thigh.
Okay. We see 2 separate wounds. Which is the entrance and which is the exit?
The larger wound, more towards the top of the picture, is the entrance wound. The smaller wound, more towards the bottom of the picture, is the exit wound.
Did you see any sort of stippling around either of these wounds?
I did not.
Can you describe the damage this projectile did as it traveled through her body?
Like the previous gunshot wound, this one's very superficial. It went just deep to the skin, so the injuries it would have caused would have been lacerations and hemorrhage of the subcutaneous soft tissue again.
Can you describe the path of travel the projectile took, the direction?
Back to front and slightly upward.
Okay. Showing you photograph 14 of States 22. What does this show?
This is a probe showing the path of the gunshot wound through the decedent.
And were you able to recover any projectile from this wound?
I was not.
Showing you diagram 3 of States 21. What does this show in the upper right-hand corner?
This is a drawing or a diagram showing the path of the wound through the decedent.
Okay. Regarding the wounds that you have just described, did you also examine Lieutenant Clayton's uniform shirt and pants?
Her uniform pants and a T-shirt, I did not receive the uniform shirt.
Okay. The undershirt she was wearing, you looked at?
Yes, I did receive that.
Did you locate any damage to those items of clothing consistent with the location of the wounds in her body?
Yes.
Okay. Showing you photograph 15 of States 22. What do we see here? You mentioned some abrasions and some blunt trauma.
This is the left side of the decedent's face. What you see, all those red areas are what we call abrasions or scrapes from a blunt force trauma to the right cheek and face.
And what do you mean by blunt force trauma?
Well, blunt force trauma is any trauma caused by a blunt force. To help explain that, we often say sharp force is something caused by obviously something sharp like a knife or a sword or an ice pick, something like that, something that can either stab or slash you. Conversely, or anything that's blunt is something that's not sharp. So that kind of helps explain what a blunt force is.
Are these injuries we see to her face, could they be consistent with her falling and striking her face on the pavement?
Yes.
Okay. Showing you diagram number 4 of States 21. What do we see here?
That's a diagram showing the blunt force trauma to her left face.
Showing you photograph 16 of States 22. Did you locate any injuries on her knees?
Yes.
What does this show?
Again, that's a blunt force trauma to the knees. Those are abrasions.
Okay. Can you tell if these injuries were relatively fresh, meaning they occurred at or around the time of her death?
Yes, we call them perimortem, meaning they were incurred at or around the time of death.
And how do you know that?
Because we look for what we call a vital reaction, meaning it's still red. You see some redness there, and there's no healing to them.
Okay. Did you also examine her pants in those areas?
Yes.
Did you notice any damage or defects to her pants around the knee area?
There appeared to be some scuff marks on the knee area of the pants.
Were the scuff marks in the knee area consistent with the location of her injury?
Yes.
And showing you photograph 17 of States 22. What does this show?
It's really hard to tell without backing up the picture, but I think this is one of her elbows.
Okay. Did you locate an injury on her elbow?
Yes, to the right elbow.
Did the injury to her elbow appear to have occurred at or around the same time as her death and the other injuries?
Yes.
Are the injuries to her elbow and her knees consistent with her falling and hitting those portions of her body on pavement?
Yes.
Did you collect a sample of Lieutenant Clayton's blood during the course of your autopsy?
Yes.
What was the purpose of that?
We collect DNA samples on everyone who passes through our office.
Did you also send any blood for toxicology purposes?
Yes.
Okay. Did you locate any kind of illegal substance, drugs, alcohol, or anything relevant in the toxicology screen?
The only thing identified in her toxicology screen was caffeine.
Okay. Did you locate any other diseases, medical problems, or anything like that that could have caused or contributed to cause her death?
I did not.
What is meant by cause of death?
Cause of death can pretty much be an infinite amount of things. So whatever starts the chain of process that leads to someone's death.
What did you determine the cause of death to be in this case?
Gunshot wounds.
And what is meant by the term manner of death?
Manner of death only has 5 categories: natural, accident, suicide, homicide, undetermined. It's the way we classify how someone dies, the manner how someone dies.
And what did you determine the manner of death to be in the case of Lieutenant Debra Clayton?
Homicide.
Thank you, Doctor. I have no further questions.
Cross.
Good afternoon, Doctor.
Good afternoon.
Now, you mentioned the 4 wounds that Lieutenant Clayton suffered.
Yes.
Okay. Of those 4 wounds, which would cause her to become unconscious?
The wounds that I described, the one that went through her neck and exited her left back, would be the most severe of all 4 I described. The one that went through her right buttock and exited her abdomen could also cause her to lose consciousness, but not right away.
Okay. And were you at any time, Doctor, given the bulletproof vest that Lieutenant Clayton was wearing at the time of her death?
Could you repeat the question, please?
Were you at any time given the vest that she was wearing to examine at any time?
No.
So you couldn't actually say whether those wounds were caused by going through her vest or going through another portion that's not covered?
I couldn't say what the projectile went through prior to her body, no.
But you did testify there was at least one that was passing through and was not able to get out because of some hard surface.
Correct.
And that would be consistent with the vest.
Yes.
And the wound to her neck, could you tell us or tell the jury how far above the top of the vest would that wound be?
I can't tell you that because I don't know where that vest would have been placed on her.
Okay. Now, you would agree with me, hypothetically, if Lieutenant Clayton was moving away and shooting, that she would be able to continue shooting even on the ground until she's incapacitated. Isn't that correct?
I'm not sure I understand your question. Could you repeat it, please?
My hypothetical is, you said that there were 2 wounds that were possible. that could cause unconsciousness. Is that
Yes.
right? The neck wound and the hip wound, correct?
Yes.
Let's say hypothetically she was shot in the hip and it caused her to fall. Would you be surprised if she had the ability to continue to fire her gun even after that wound?
No.
I have no further questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Redirect.
Could Lieutenant Clayton have survived any of those gunshot wounds except for the wound to her neck?
Yes.
So the 3 wounds, the wound to her leg, to her buttock, and to her abdomen, being superficial wounds, she could have survived?
Well, the one to her buttock was not superficial, but I don't believe it would have been instantly incapacitating, so I believe it's possible she could have survived that if she made it to the hospital in time.
Okay. The wound to her neck would have been the fatal wound?
Yes.
Thank you, Doctor.
May this witness be excused?
Yes, Your Honor.
State or defense?
No, Judge.
All right, doctor, you're excused for now. You remain under subpoena and subject to recall. Thank you very much. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Call your next witness.
State calls Karen Leib.
Remove your mask. Face the clerk. Raise your right hand.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
This is for you. Do you need it?
Oh, thank you. You may inquire.
Good afternoon.
Hi.
All right, so every now and then I'm going to step around so you can see my face. Could you please tell us your full name and spell your last name for the members of the jury, please?
It's Karen Livengood. That's L-I-V as in Victor, E-N-G-O-O-D.
Miss Livengood, you are currently retired, is that right?
That's correct.
And from what career and agency did you retire?
Orlando Police Department.
And what was your job title at the Orlando Police Department when you retired?
Crime scene investigator.
Can you tell us, even if it's approximate, if you don't know the exact day that you retired from the Orlando Police Department?
May of 2019.
Did you work as a crime scene investigator for the entirety of your career at the Orlando Police Department?
Yes, I did.
Generally, it's been touched on before, but can you just tell us what your role was as a crime scene investigator?
Crime scene investigator responds out to scenes either by the request of an officer and/or a detective, taking photographs, marking evidence, collecting evidence, sometimes at the scene, processing the scene, bringing the evidence back to the crime scene facility, and then you can process more of the evidence at the crime scene facility and packaging and putting it into property and evidence.
Can you tell us a little bit about your background and training, including education, that prepared you for your role as a crime scene investigator, whether you received that before you went to work at OPD or while you were at OPD?
I actually had a bachelor's degree in forensic science before I was hired with OPD. While at OPD, we go through a bunch of different types of classes. One was, back then, was 80 hours of crime scene investigations. I had basic and advanced fingerprint processing. Also have had basic and advanced bloodstain pattern analysis, all 40 hours, on top of another 120 hours of more of the bloodstain classes, on top of having 2 years as a mentorship in bloodstain pattern analysis. We also we take a basic photography class. On top, I've also done some anthropology classes. Been to the body farm in Tennessee, was there for a week. And just continuing taking anything new that comes in.
And you may have said this, and if you did, I apologize. I was fiddling with my microphone. How many total years did you work at the Orlando Police Department as a crime scene investigator?
Over 20 years.
Were you employed as a crime scene investigator for the Orlando Police Department on the morning of January 9th of 2017?
Yes, I was.
And what was your shift that you were scheduled to work that day?
My schedule was 6 to 2. I was on the day shift.
During that shift, did you respond to a call in reference to a homicide investigation at 3101 West Princeton Street in Orlando that morning?
Yes, I did.
How did you become aware that something had occurred at the Walmart and that your response was needed?
I was listening, actually there's 3 of us, but I was listening to the emergency channel that we have, and it was in reference to a shooting. And so we were just listening to it. And then when we started getting a little bit more of the information, we knew we were gonna be going.
Were you the senior person that morning?
Yes.
And when you responded to the scene, did you become the lead crime scene investigator into the investigation of the homicide of Debra?
Yes, I did.
Can you tell us how it was that you got to the Walmart from where you were located at your office?
We have crime scene vans, and I responded that way. It was a little difficult because there were some traffic issues for us to get through, but that's how each of us went. We each had our own vans.
Did anyone ride with you that morning?
No.
When you first arrived, were other members, if not riding with you, responding at the same time of your team?
Yes.
And who was that person or persons?
It'd be CSI Steyer and CSI Martinez.
Do you recall what time it was that you arrived at the Walmart parking lot?
Around 7:45 in the morning.
Can you tell us what you observed when you first arrived on scene?
The scene had been already roped off or crime scene tape put around by the officers. And occasionally we have to make them expand it out a little bit, but it was already roped off when I got there.
Did you meet with anyone to obtain some initial information about what had occurred? Without saying what they told you, did you actually meet with someone to get that information?
Yes.
And who was that person?
Detective Cadiz.
As the lead crime scene investigator on this investigation, what did that mean your role would be on this specific morning?
As a lead CSI on the case, you're responsible for how evidence is collected, how you do all the photography yourself, and then you put markers down. You're responsible to make sure that everything that can get collected that you see at the scene.
What did you do following your briefing?
Started the photography. I knew it was kind of spread out a little bit, so I had some cones, what they call tent cones with markers on them, that I kind of have a tendency to loop in my back loop because, just in case you get something that's small, that hasn't been marked by an officer, most of the time the officers will take their business cards and fold it in half, but things happen. And it was windy, I think, that day too.
So when you say you put some cones in your back loop of what?
My pants, sorry. That's how I carry it.
All right. Now, Your Honor, may I approach the witness to what's been marked and placed in evidence as States 2?
You may.
Ms. Livengood, I'm going to show you the first diagram, not the last, the first diagram. States Exhibit 2, do you recognize that general area?
Yes.
And what do you recognize it to be?
The northwest side of the wall mark.
And is this the part of the general area that you investigated and looked for evidence on the morning of January 9th?
Yes.
Okay. So you said the area was roped off and you started taking photographs. Can you just generally describe for us the area of interest that you were looking for evidence in?
That there was a section that was slightly in front of the Walmart, of the parking lot itself, that I was told everything occurred at in this general facility, general area. Now, of course, as you take overall photographs first. That's when you walk around more or less in a circle and you just start taking pictures. Then when you start walking into the scene, you do the exact same thing, what they call medium shots. And then eventually you'll do the close-up shots of the evidence itself. And what I did was the exact same thing, but when I started walking in to the scene, I started the corner of my eye, I was seeing where some stuff were located. And as you're walking in, what I like to do is I would put the cones down, just because it makes it just a little easier to start seeing where things were occurring. And then I'll go back through and take photographs, close-up photographs of the items before I get them collected. Most of the time I leave, not evidence, but I leave cones down, but I'll collect the evidence and it goes into a sealed bag and then I seal it up.
So the cones are lettered, is that right?
They're the tent letters, yes.
Is there any significance to the order of the lettering?
No, not really. Each CSI has a certain plan that they like to go with. And I've worked enough of these cases that I had my plan in place.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness with what's been marked as States Composite Exhibits W and Y?
Yes.
Your Honor, W is a composite of 5 photographs. Y is a composite also of 5 photographs. Ms. Livengood, I'm going to show you States Exhibit W. You recognize the images depicted in those 5 photographs.
Yes, these are the photographs I took.
Are those the overall or the overview photographs or part
Yes,
of them?
yes,
And do they very accurately depict the Walmart scene overview from that morning?
yes.
All right. Now I'll trade you and hand you States Composite Y. Could you do the same thing, look at those photos and tell me if you recognize what's in them?
Yes.
And what are those photographs?
These are photographs of locations of the starting of the cones, the cones that I used, A through C.
Do they fairly and accurately depict the evidence that you marked with cones A through C on the morning of January 9th?
Yes.
Your Honor, I'd ask the court to admit States Exhibits W and Y as the next numbered exhibits.
Any objection? All right, W will be admitted as States Exhibit number 25 without objection, consisting of 5 sequentially numbered photographs. Y will be admitted as States Exhibit number 26 without objection, consisting of 5 sequentially numbered photographs.
Your Honor, permission to publish State's Exhibits 25 and 26 to the members of the jury?
You may.
Ms. Livengood, there should be a screen in front of you. with
Yes.
Your name on it. Do you see that?
Yes.
All right, I'm going to publish now State's Exhibit 25, or the first photograph of State's 25. What are we looking at a picture of in that photograph, and where were you taking the picture?
You're looking at the Walmart, and this is to document where the scene occurred at.
Now, I see some crime scene tape at the bottom of the screen. Do you see that?
Yes.
Where in this photograph, to the right, to the left, or in the center, was the primary area of interest, if you can tell from the photo?
You can't tell as well on this one, this photo, but it's going to be,
We can go to the next photo. Try the
you-
next photo?
Yes, please.
Yes, ma'am. Photograph number 2 of State's Exhibit 25.
That's
Can you
better.
use that a little bit better?
Yes.
Go ahead and describe for us, please.
The scene itself was located, if you're facing that Walmart, the left side of the Walmart, where the pharmacy and where you can walk in through those doors, the double doors.
So are there entry doors underneath that sign that says Market and Pharmacy?
Yes.
And so is the area you're referring to somewhat directly outside or in front of those doors?
Yes.
Is that a fair characterization?
Yes.
All right. I'm going to show you photograph now number 3 of State's 25. From what direction and what angle are we looking at here?
In this particular photograph, I'm looking the exact side that is northwest of the sign, the Walmart sign, and I'm close to the Walmart. There's a wall there, and I'm standing there taking my overall photograph.
All right. Image number 4 of State's Exhibit 25. Can you describe areas of interest in that photograph, please?
Yes, this is going to be the main area of the scene, and you can see where the cones are located on the ground, where I've already marked some stuff. And like there was a vehicle that had been hit too.
By hit, you mean what?
I'm sorry, the window was shattered.
All right. And photograph number 5 of State's Exhibit 25. What do we see in that photograph?
This is just on the opposite side of where I was standing up against that wall. This is the other side now, but it's more close to where the doors are,
Okay.
if that makes sense.
It does. Now we're going to publish Exhibit 26, and we're just going to walk through the cones, okay? So I'm going to ask you what is at each cone. First of all, what cone are you photographing in this particular picture?
Say that again?
Which specific cone are you photographing in this particular picture?
Actually, I'm trying to get in as much of the cones that I can, to whereas it started where A was, but it also gives you a little bit of perspective of some of the other cones and where they're located.
I think you said earlier that A is where you would have begun marking exhibits?
That's where I started there.
Yes, ma'am. What do we see in this photograph?
That is spent casing, 40 cal.
And that's photograph number 2 of the exhibit. Photograph number 3.
B and C are also spent casings, and those are the 9. It's a 9 mil. Yes.
4 is a close-up of B.
It's just showing just a close-up. See, you start off with that far distance, and then you can walk up, and that'll give you a perspective of where things were, and that's how I do it.
And now publishing photograph 5 of State's Exhibit 26.
And it's the same thing. C was not that far from where B was located.
Okay. Your Honor, may I approach the witness of what's been marked as State's Composite Z? It is a composite of 18 photographs they've been shown to defense counsel.
You may.
Ms. Livengood, there's 18 photographs State's Composite C. Could you please just take your time, look through them, and then if they're admitted, we'll talk about them. Have you had a chance to look at them all?
Yes.
And you recognize the photographs in State's Exhibit Z?
Yes.
And do they fairly and accurately depict the evidence that was photographed and collected at the Walmart on the morning of January 9th, 2017?
Yes.
Thank you. I'd ask to admit State's Exhibit Composite Z as the next numbered exhibit.
Any objections? No objection. All right, this will be admitted without objection as State's number 27, composite exhibit consisting of 18 photographs, numerically numbered, sequentially numbered, sorry.
Your Honor, permission to publish State's Exhibit 27?
Granted.
So actually, before we do that, Ms. Livengood, I'm going to go back for a moment to the last exhibit. We showed you photographs and you referenced a casing. There's been some discussion, but I want to make sure that we're clear about that. What is a shell casing like the one depicted in photograph 5 of State's 26 next to the C cone?
A shell casing is a casing that holds the bullet in place. And once the bullet has been fired from the gun, the casing will eject and it'll land on the ground.
Now, is that all firearms that eject casings or only certain types of firearms?
Not all firearms, no.
What specific types of firearms eject casings as opposed to leaving them in the gun?
Semi-automatic.
All right. Can you tell by looking at a casing the caliber of the firearm that fired it?
Yes.
And how do you tell that?
You can look at the flat end of a casing, and it'll give you a manufacturer and it'll give a caliber.
And we'll talk about it in detail in a moment, but did you in fact look at all the casings you recovered for manufacturer and caliber in this case?
Yes, I did.
Now, do you know the caliber of the firearm that Lieutenant Clayton was carrying on the morning of January 9th of 2017?
9 mil.
All right. And is mil short for millimeter?
Millimeter.
Yes, ma'am. And do you recall what type of firearm she was carrying?
It was a Sig Sauer. I think the model was P226.
Mr. Lemon. Now, may I approach the witness to what's been marked as State's Exhibit X?
You may.
It's been shown to counsel. Ms. Livengood, I'm showing you what's been marked as State's Exhibit X. It's already been opened, so you can open it up and look inside. My specific question for you is that the firearm that was recovered from the Walmart parking lot on the morning of January 9th of 2017?
Yes.
And is that a Sig Sauer 226 that you just described?
Yes.
Eventually identified as the firearm of Lieutenant Debra Clayton?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time, we'd ask the court to admit State's Exhibit X as the next numbered exhibit.
Any objections? No objection. This will be admitted as State's Exhibit number 27. Or is it 28? Sorry, 28.
Your Honor, permission to publish the firearm just by holding it at a distance?
You may.
Thank you. Would you hand me one of the gloves from there, Ms. Livengood?
My Lord.
Thank you very much. On the bottom down here, Ms. Livengood, what is that? I can come closer if you'd like, sorry. On the bottom of the firearm.
Actually, that is it's a light, I believe.
Yes, ma'am. Did you, in addition to recovering Lieutenant Clayton's firearm, did you eventually recover and conduct an inventory of her gun belt and magazines that were a part of that gun belt?
I actually didn't collect the firearm and the belt until later. CSI Steyer is the one that took care of that.
She provided them to you?
Yes,
Did you inventory them once they were provided to you?
yes.
Right? Were you able to look at the magazines and cartridges in Lieutenant Clayton's firearm?
Yes.
And what type or what size and manufacturer of cartridges was her gun carrying on the morning of January 9th?
Winchester, it's Win, 9mm Lugers.
So now we're going to go forward to State's Exhibit 27 and go one by one. I'm publishing number one, photograph number one of State's Exhibit 27. Tell us, please, what we're looking at in this photograph.
In this particular photograph, I'm on the, you could say, east side of where the majority of the evidence was actually located. And this is giving you an overall as much of the cones that I could fit in the picture.
There's a black area, and it looks like perhaps marker 1 in the middle. What is that object in the middle of the screen? And if we need to go to a different photo so you can see it, I can do that.
Yes, please.
So we're going to go through them individually. Photograph number 2 is a shell casing, is that right?
That's going to be a spent casing, that's correct.
And every now and then I'll go back to the outline so you can see where they are. Now publishing photograph number 3, another shell casing.
Also spent casing, that's correct.
Photograph number 4.
Same thing, it's a spent casing.
And could you tell us the placard or the cone that it's located at?
That one is where it's located?
Which letter?
Oh, it's F, letter F, and it's, I'd have to look at the main photo to be able to start going through them.
I'm asking so that the young lady typing it down can put F. That's why I'm asking. Yes, ma'am. And photograph number 5?
Is G, cone G, and it's a spent casing.
Now, photograph number 6 of State's Exhibit 27, what do we see in this photograph?
In this photograph, you're going to see a police vest and a shirt, police shirt.
And who is it believed that those vest and shirt belong to?
Lieutenant Clayton.
Photograph 7, what do we see in that photograph?
This is going to be cone H, and it's a spent casing.
Photo number 8?
This is cone I, and it's also a spent casing.
Photograph 9?
This is going to be J, cone J, and it's a spent casing.
Photograph 10?
This is going to be cone K, and it's also a spent casing.
Number 11?
Cone L, spent casing.
And now 12, we've backed out again. Describe what we see in this image.
This is going to show some of the cones from a different angle.
All right? Photograph 13.
Cone M is spent casing.
14.
Cone N, spent casing.
Now 15, it appears we've changed location. Can you tell us what we see in this photograph?
This one, as you're looking at the photograph itself, you can see the crime scene tape on the pillar. Well, the cone itself is located at the bottom of the pillar, technically showing where it had landed, whatever it was landed. And that's going to be a spent casing cone O.
And that's photograph 16. Photograph 17, what do we see in photograph 17?
Looks like you're seeing Q, cone Q, and cone I in this one.
And what do we see in photograph 18?
Cone Q is going to be a projectile,
Now,
or the bullet, if that makes it easier.
yes, ma'am. If you go back to the initial photograph, there was not a marker Q. Do you recall what I'm saying? The very first photograph that you took of the overview, Q was not a cone.
That's correct. Yes, you're right.
Can you tell the members of the jury why Q was not in the initial photographs, but was photographed later on?
When you have this type of a scene, a big scene like this, there is occasionally when you start taking your photographs, you're going to see some evidence. And when I got closer to taking the photographs around the shirt and the vest, that's when I spotted the bullet or projectile.
Now, we've now used three terms, bullet, projectile, and casing. What's the difference between a bullet/projectile and a casing?
Bullet, well, the bullet is what houses inside the spent casing. You can call them bullet or you can say projectile. I prefer projectile. That's what's in my report.
And
And
that's the portion of the cartridge that actually exits the firearm, the front of the firearm.
Front of the firearm, that's correct.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness of what's been marked as State's Exhibits AA and AB?
Yes.
They've both been shown to counsel. Ms. Livengood, I'm going to show you State's Composite AA. It's a composite of 10 photographs. Could you please look at those photos and tell me if you recognize what's in them? Do you recognize the images in the 10 photographs, ma'am?
Yes.
And what do you recognize them to be?
And these are the photographs that I took at the scene.
Specifically of vehicles that were struck?
Evidence and vehicles. There's 2 vehicles.
Do they fairly and accurately depict the photographs that you took in the scene at the Walmart on the morning of January 9th, 2017?
Yes.
Now I'm going to trade you, and I'm going to hand you State's Exhibit AB, Alpha Bravo. It's a composite of 2 photographs. Could you look at those 2 and tell me if you recognize what's depicted in those?
Yes, I recognize them.
And what do you recognize it to be?
This is just, I'm standing by the yield sign that's on the ground. You know, when you're walking to go into a place, there are sometimes yield signs for cars to yield to pedestrians. And in this particular case, I'm looking at it because we located another piece.
At which cone, ma'am?
This is going to be cone S.
And do those two photographs fairly and accurately depict the photographs that you took of cone S?
Yes.
Thank you. Your Honor, I'd ask the court to admit State's Exhibits AA and AB as the next numbered exhibits.
Any objections? No objection. All right, thank you. So AA will be admitted without objection as State's Exhibit number 29. It is a composite exhibit consisting of 10 sequentially numbered photographs. AB will be admitted as State's Exhibit number 30 without objection, 2 photographs. Composite exhibit.
Your Honor, permission to publish, may I have permission to publish State's Exhibit 29?
Yes, sir.
So same thing, Ms. Livengood, photographs on the screen. I'm publishing photograph number 1 of State's Exhibit 29. Now, earlier, when you first started testifying, you said a vehicle was hit or struck. Do you see that vehicle in the photograph?
Yes.
And can you describe it? How many doors, the color, that kind of thing?
There's actually 2 vehicles in this, but this vehicle is the silver, I think it's a silver Mercury, and it's the window, the passenger side window was shattered. And you
Photograph
can,
2, a little closer up.
yes,
And there's actually a cone number 3 on top of a shopping cart. Why did you place a cone there, ma'am?
when I received my briefing, I was told that the shopping cart was used in the scene.
Okay. Photograph 3 of State's 29, what do we see there?
You can see the window a little bit better, how it's shattered.
Now, photograph 4.
This is I think it's an F-150 black truck.
Now, do you see or can you see in this photograph a defect in the truck?
Yes.
Can you describe where in the photograph the defect is?
If you look above the wheel itself and you've got the quarter panel, you'll see I put some, you can see where an area of the truck above that by the quarter panel has damage. It just shows that. And then you can go in closer and you can see the damage that was done.
Is that an actual hole in the quarter panel?
Yes.
In photograph 6, there's a cone beneath the truck. Can you describe why you took that photograph and what's that cone P?
Cone P is going to be part of I don't know if it's is there a close-up of P that you can show?
Yes, ma'am.
There you go. It's going to be the lead bullet that had hit the car and damaged, obviously, and then went and it landed on the ground.
Photograph 8.
This is just showing the inside of the Mercury. I think that's a Mercury or silver car, showing more damage that the glass that's on the inside of the car and the window that really shattered.
And photograph 9.
Cone T is going to show that there is something on the floor that looks like could be related to the scene that I needed to get close-ups of, and this is a copper jacket.
And that's photograph 10. A copper jacket is, what is a copper jacket?
A copper jacket is going to be the outside, it's the housing of the bullet itself. If you can think of layers, it's the outside layer that is surrounding the bullet. It's a lead bullet is the lead piece. And then this is just what they call copper jacket, which is the surrounding the outside. And it goes through the barrel of the gun, and it can give you a little bit better description on what you're looking.
I'm now going to publish the 2 photographs from State's Exhibit 30. Photograph number 1, which cone are we looking at?
Cone S.
And I think you mentioned earlier that cone S was not initially placed, is that right?
I'm sorry?
That cone S was not initially placed or photographed, it was found subsequent?
It was one of those that when you start walking through the scene, you can start seeing things. And this is also a copper jacket, piece of one anyway.
Now, we've been looking at photographs of all of these items, and But I think you said earlier, and I want to clarify, you collected every shell casing, projectile, bullet that you photographed, is that right?
That I saw at the scene, yes.
The ones that we've seen pictures of?
Yes.
Now, may I approach the witness to what's been marked as State's Exhibit AC, it's been shown to counsel. It's a diagram. Livengood, do you recognize AC?
Yes, I do.
And what do you recognize it to be?
This is just giving you a general accuracy that you could say from a scanner. We had our Leica scanner out there, and this is just showing the placement of where the evidence was located.
So there are letters on that diagram, is that right?
That's correct.
Did you go through using the digital representation and place the specific caliber of shell casing and corresponded to a letter on the diagram?
Yes, I did.
And does that diagram fairly and accurately depict the locations of the different shell casings that you recovered on the morning of January 9th?
Yes.
Your Honor, I'd ask the court to admit State's Exhibit AC as State's 31.
Any objection? All right, let me see the attorneys at the bench. If y'all want to stand up right where you are and stretch, feel free to do that. All right, we're going to take a 10-minute break since the jury needed one. Ma'am, you can step off and take a break. You can't talk to anybody, or you can just sit there.
I think I'll sit here.
Okay.